Still.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's an important point to note that I identify as a white person. I do have some ties to the Hispanic community, and I can talk about that later. So it's like white with a little flavor. But I don't have direct ties to the Black community, whether that's, locally or, no family members or people in my immediate circle. So it was interesting to be in that place and to be in an area where I think the national average of people that identify as Black is like 14%. Probably in our area, it's closer to about 9%, so lower than national average. So it's interesting to be a white person and go, I want to do something about this. And I know from my social work education, whenever there's a movement and you're not a member of the movement per se, but you seek to support social change, then you show up, you do the work, and you shut up. Like, in a nutshell, like that's kind of what we're called to do. So I was looking for opportunities to do that. Like, where can I lend my experience, knowledge, and expertise to support the people who are being directly affected, or to give them access to resources and tools that they need to advocate for themselves, or to be able to reach, what they need. And so for me, that looked like branching with another social work colleague who feels very strongly about this too, and trying to see where some of our state's breakdowns in policing are. And of course, and we're social workers who we're trained in community organization and interventions that promote social change, but we know nothing about policing. Like, I did a little bit of work in criminal justice as a social worker, so I'm like, I know how to show up to court and talk to police officers and things like that. But this is very different. So I thought, okay, well, this is what I know. What can I do? And so he and I reviewed the public information available for West Virginia's state policing and their standards for training, and we learned that the education standards seemed low. And like I said, this is an outsider judging when I don't have all the information, but this is what getting in and doing the work looks like. You don't know what the heck you're doing when you start. You got to get in there and uncover some pieces and learn some things. So our initial observation was like, there's a little blurb about policing with minority populations. That's what it's called. And there's a little blurb about policing for mental health. In our community, a man was murdered, and he was African American, shot 20 some times, and he was psychotic. He was in the midst of a mental health episode. So this was on my colleagues and my radar, and so we were looking at, okay, what does fair policing for people with mental health and addictions look like too, because that's part of the conversation. And the one little training that was offered, I think it was 4 hours total in the whole state policing training curriculum online, which may be different in practice. That one little training was taught by a licensed clinical social worker, which is our credentials. So our crazy way of thinking is like, if not now, when? And if not us, then who? So we're trying to become more involved in the community, connecting with our local NAACP chapter, and seeing, in the wake of our own community tragedy, what has already happened? Where is communication breaking down with the police? Where is there a lack of training? And what can we do to help? So that's been a long answer to a short question of like, what have I been doing? But if I can kind of highlight the bits of what I think anybody can do is, just start, reach out to the people that you feel are being connected, ask them what they need. What do they need from you to show up and be an ally? And, ask questions, look a little bit more deeper, see what matches your skill set. Fortunately, what's happening now just so happens to match the skill set that me and my colleagues were trained in. I know that's not always the case, but if you're an artist, make protest art. If you're a carpenter, build something, a platform for people to stand on so they can talk about their change points. So just use your strengths and talents to amplify the message. Ask questions and be open to the responses. What they might need from the people that are being directly affected in any given, social situation, in this case, Black people, do they need childcare so that they can protest? Do they need access to legal resources? Which is another thing that came up, was there wasn't enough legal funds to bail out all the people arrested at a local protest. So me, getting on the phone and calling places and asking if they have a means to contribute to legal aid. Like, that's not something that I'd ever done before, but I'm capable of picking up a phone and I can figure it out. So the moral of the story is, yeah, you're not going to know, but ask questions, be open to the answers, and problem solve and figure it out as best as you can. That's all anyone can do. Hear, hear. I wish that there were more listening projects in communities. Listening projects are things that cropped up on college campuses that were just basically like a guy sitting in a chair in a public place, or a girl, and saying like, come sit down with me, just talk to me about your problems. And, very informal, not mental health, but it was just a way of connecting to people meaningfully and hearing each other's stories. And, I wish that there were more listening projects hosted between BIPOC people, specifically Black people right now, because one thing that I noticed in studying up on, what makes safe policing, because I've had to get educated on this topic. It was not an area of expertise of mine. So the more that I look it up, the more study support, the more interaction between white officers and communities of color, the more safe policing practices get. Like, whenever you have an opportunity to humanize the people that you're policing, you're going to have less instances of the types of prejudice that lead to these tragedies happening. So it's something as basic as having, a block party, or, I've seen some places roll out, like, have coffee with an officer, which is interesting. I don't know how successful that is. For like 9 years of my career was spent with mandated mental health for folks that had criminal records. So I'm just trying to think of any one of my clients that had, that were on probation or parole would volunteer to have coffee with an officer. I'm thinking,
Yeah,
but there's a playground that is down the hill in my neighborhood, and it is well known that, well, first of all, it's like so crowded. I don't know how anybody can play basketball. But they have this one large basketball court, tons of kids, mostly, young men and boys that are out there. And there's almost always one officer playing, and like plain clothes, but everybody knows he's an officer, but he's just out there playing basketball. And like, every time I think of just person-to-person interactions, off-duty interactions between officers and the communities they serve are always going to boost healthier policing practices. And so that's the kind of stuff that I'm after, and then I'm asking questions about, and that I would love to see in my own community, because one day my kiddos are going to grow up, and they're not Black, but they will be white and Hispanic, and people are going to have assumptions about them based on their color, their age, and I would want them to be policed by somebody who respects them and is willing to keep them safe. And that's part of the only type of personal, if I could even say that, connection that I feel towards the Black community is, hearing an African American mother and about the talk,